in this space, in the space of entrepreneurship. So it does many firsts to its credit, right? And as you might have all known, that we are also going to our new facility in a couple of months. It would be one of the largest innovation campus in the country. So it's T-Hub, T-Works, Image, all of these kind of form the largest innovation campus in the whole world as well. So that's the kind, and also welcome them on behalf of T-Hub. Welcome to Hyderabad. Welcome to T-Hub. It's our pleasure to host you this afternoon, and I'm sure that the startups here are going to really get a complete understanding on how the US tax structure works and the compliances work, and what they should be really doing to kind of be ready to enter the US market and the global market. Thank you. And Mr. Martin, founder of Breakaway and Bookkeeping and Advising. Yeah. Hi, Martin. So thank you very much for coming here, and thank you for sharing your valuable knowledge and insights with our startups. One of our endeavor is to make our startups globally ready. And in India now, some notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon to all. This is Srinivas, and today's event I'm the moderator. I'm a chartered accountant by qualification, and I'm doing practice in India for the Indian audit, taxation and corporate matters. Today, as CEO of the Chicago-based CPA firm. Okay, thanks Dave for being here for this event. And we have with us Amy. Okay, Amy is a international business consulting partner with over 17 years of experience, specializing in global business affairs and tax issues. As an international tax license, she is known for being globally connected and locally available to help clients navigate a wide range of domestic and cross-border operations, business expansion, and other matters. Thanks, Amy. Solutions leading to cost savings, efficiencies, and continuity by effectively relating the people, process, and technology. And by the way, Fanny is an ex-Ranji trophy player. So, okay, that's it with the introduction. Thank you, Fanny, for being a part of this session. Before we get into the technical session for today's event, I request Dave to come and to briefly explain about the PKF Mueller and the MDK for a few minutes. Yeah. Yes, slides.
And we'll talk to you a little bit about that. But you know, the reason why that's happening around the world, and a lot of you are doing tech companies right now, is that there's a lot of need. There's no people available. There's very low resources of people and personnel around the world, wherever I go. And now a lot of you are young. I see a lot of young faces. There was mortgages were at 16%. It was a lot of inflation. Now the good news is when I started at Mueller, I got a 12% pay raise my first year. And that wasn't because I was doing a great job, it's because it was inflation. So we're gonna have inflation, but Mueller.Connect, the reason why we have that with Fani and our team here in India is because so these, as you know, I'm the CEO of both PKF Mueller and Mueller.Connect. We have Jeff, who's here with me. He's the president of PKF Mueller, and we have Rob Corsi, who's president. We have a wealth management arm too. We have about $1 billion of assets under management, so that's something we do also. We also have, if we go to the next slide, Amy Shamoon. She's going to be doing some of the presentation in India. A lot of the clients we have, Beth is working with. And then Funny is president of Mueller.Connect. He's doing a great job. And Martin is a board member and vice president of acquisitions for Mueller.Connect, and he's sitting over here. If we can, next slide. So normally I have a clicker, by the way, but I'm using Funny now. Funny's my clicker. So we have 7 locations as you people, very, very good. So as you can see, our headquarters, we have our main headquarters of of Mueller.Connect is in Plano, Texas, and our main headquarters for peace questions, and the answer is only yes. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So we are an international firm. So we're part of F. I'm on the international board. I actually have a board because every country is a little different. So it's important to have this type of a reach around the world. We have different service lines. You're going to need transaction advisory, right? Because you have to determine what a good deal is for you. If you want to take equity, equity funding or debt funding, risk and controls. You know, a lot of this analytics, that's a thing that we're getting into big time right now. We do a lot of business intelligence. We now are hiring non-accountants. We're actually hiring kind of some people like you guys right now, like to helping us get into Power BI and our mail. And that's a really big deal. And now those numbers are only growing because there's more and more females in the accounting profession. When I went to college, it wasn't like that, but more and more females are getting into it. Don't keep your good people, you have nothing. People is everything in every business. So I'm proud to say we've won Best Places to Work in Illinois 12 years in a row. We just got our 12th year 2 weeks ago. And I always tell people, if I get the Deloitte on it, okay, they're big. You know, they're one of the big four, but 143rd, we're proud of it. So we're a large-sized firm. We're inter-Navy at 21 years old, and it's been my only job. I've only worked at one place. Now, you guys, these young people, you guys will probably have like 12 jobs in your life. You might have already had 3 jobs, but I've been there my whole life. And we've got a couple other things. We have the Al Mueller. There's a man named Al Mueller. When I started, he was the founding partner. We have a scholarship in his name that we do. And we do a lot of global employee exchange programs. So we take firms, and actually Amy started this at our firm, but we have a values that was very important, and that's under the acronym PRIDE. But we want to be proactive in our approach. We want to respect one another. We have to have dedication, we want to inspire, and we want to be enthusiastic. And I think these are all really important. You have to have a value. But now it's really funny. Now I say it right, but half the time I say it wrong, but I can't help myself. He's a funny guy, though. He's a good guy. And we make that happen. Once we do that, we can outsource all the responsibility of things to us. So we work with a lot of large and medium-sized companies around the world to help them with this process. As you can see, you know, one of the sayings that I always use is you really want to work on your business, not in your business. But this quote is saying we could just a couple of technicians to do certain things, look at statistics, look at metrics to run their business more effectively. So this is really one of the key taglines for Mueller.Connect, transform, manage, and empower. That's called the trifecta. So why Mueller.Connect? I tell this to people because we have great people here, and it's really the power. Our experience, we're an international firm, so we know a lot about companies around the world. We know a lot about Indian companies coming into the United States or vice versa. And scale and flexibility. We could work with large, medium.
Side, if you can adjust and sit, they will come and sit here. Yeah, please, whoever's standing there, please come and sit here. Entrepreneurs, about knowing about US company structuring and taxation. Definitely this is going to give some idea about the companies, how to start the companies in the US, how to structure the company when they form these companies in the US, and also how to plan their tax when they start a company in the US. So
Hello? Is better? Okay. Good, thanks. Hello? Yeah, first of all, thanks for being present here to listen to offer. After the session is done, because we have a program topic laid out, we'll give a survey for T-Hub to circulate to all the participants. You can send in your questions that you feel that has to be answered, which are not covered. We'll collate them, logically group, and do a webinar. Okay, don't think that this is the end of the session and we are talking 101. Some of you might be super matured already. Some of you are listening to this first time. But we want to make sure that there is value given out of this. Okay. So to start of demand for e-commerce, right? Completely virtual. You're sitting in India, you're selling $200,000, $500,000 sales through Amazon. So primarily, I'm thinking your segment is within those three. So that's how we geared this presentation to. Then the business structures, right? Corporation. So going into entity structure, so from a corporation standpoint, corporation is exactly like your private limited company. Limited in liability, and there is double tax, right, to the extent. But there is a concept of, and then not electing to be because you are not eligible for S-Corp. From an LLC standpoint, I think there is a FEMA ruling, and then Srini can comment about it. From an LLC standpoint, there are certain regulations which are debatable in and out. Then the very next question, what was that? What was that? Yeah, C-Corp. Is for somebody to take responsibility locally in the US to open an account with Chase or Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Citi, right? Citi usually, because you have a credit history already, you're eligible to get some level of credit. But forming from India, these are questions that come in. Can I open up, like even e-commerce guys, PayPal account? It's not just like that on a PayPal. You need some history, 2 years of tax returns. There is an upload process. There is a lot of headache around that. But open know the tech startup ecosystem. And they're very friendly from a credit standpoint too. If you have strong IP, they're a very good bank to bank with. Then next is, see, when you're coming into the US again, there are three office. The very next question is, yes, I open a bank account, I have no physical office. They're just a virtual office, $50, $80 per month. So very easy. But there comes, if you're in a service segment, let's say you're doing some staff aug or managed services, you have to make it as real as possible from a physical office. Even if you have a $2 million revenue, a virtual office would not be sufficient. That's what the attorneys advise. Shared offices, of course, like T-Hub, shared office, wise, a lot of clients like you who come in. But there are also self-service options. Why I put that there is all of you guys are tech savvy more than us, right? You search online, the clients come to us in that fashion, right? They search, it's just like difficult through that. Not difficult, it takes time. But just to set up an account and run an e-commerce Amazon-based shop or Shopify shop, very easy to do. Very easy in the sense, rather than going through the advisory. But I'll tell you the value prop, right? For it to flow through. And the other aspect I am seeing lately with a lot of clients like you, if there is IP, immediately they are going in for raise. Angel or high net worth, there is a lot of interest from a lot of companies that know India a lot. Some interest, something to come there. Business visa versus other. Oh, if I come on business visa, can I do some productive work sitting in the office? And these regulations are changing left, right, and center every week. So we strongly every time advise, yes, there is a, which is kind of boring. This usually will be done by somebody in the tax department or a tax firm. But those are, and then permanent establishment. PE and branch, that's an important, everybody being you, Indian resident, you're not eligible to be that. Okay. So primary considerations, I'll leave it up there for a minute just to go through. As I said, the S-Corp, no foreign investors are allowed, so you will not be qualified. So in some, yeah, please.
On the S corporation, it's just one of those rules that you can't have a foreign shareholder. However, if you are residing in the U.S. and you are a tax resident,
we have had encountered situations because you are all from India and you know immigration. There have been situations where somebody travels from here and becomes goes on a H1. So they are on a deployment, right? They go with Cognizant or Infosys or some transfer happens and they set up a company. they come to us. Somebody who don't know if you are on H1 or any other visa, you might become a resident from resident qualification standpoint, but you also want to consult an immigration attorney to make sure you are legally eligible, tax law eligible, but from an immigration standpoint, does it hurt?
Funding from investors, and a lot of times, basically, no matter what the tax repercussions are, C-Corp is what you're going to want to be, because they're all going to want to have C-Corp ownership, because they don't want to have a flow-through of income going into their corporate.
Yeah, thanks for it. Funny for this first technical session on the US entity structures. Just before we proceed with the next session, we just pause because there is some technical issue for the Zoom.
I wanted to keep the past, actually can figure out within 5 days what that machine is doing, like when it's down, what it's performing, like what task it's performing, and then it could download into Power more in terms of the way the world is now. If you have a desire to do it, you can make it happen, and age is of irrelevance. Actually, being younger is better than being old.
Branch instead of a subsidiary, a separate legal entity in the US. I think Amy will explain the differences between setting up a branch outside India versus setting up a separate legal.
Quite a bit about US tax accounting as well as India tax and accounting. Okay, so there's a few of you in here. I have quite a few clients that are in the technology space, and all the branch operations versus whether or not you should establish a legal entity such as a corporation. This slide right here is representing basically the life for 5 years later. Initially, it starts off really, really slow, and you can get yourself into situations where your activities can tend to lead into branch operations in the US. But sometimes you just want to hire an independent, thinking about incorporation. And the next three here are just common ways that businesses, once they've established, that their activities lend itself to a branch, so they incorporate or something like that. So now the end game in mind will help you when you're beginning operations in the US. This is a very complicated physical in the US, so it gets a little gray, and you need some analyses usually done whether or not you've got an issue going on there. Some of the treaty protected activities under the treaty, if you've got activities that fall within these buckets. Be careful when you're going into the US using an independent contractor relationship. It really has to be independent. If they're exclusive to you, those activities could create a branch operations for you in the US. File in the US when they've got branch activities is an 1120F, which is a foreign corporation return for US corporate income tax purposes, and the 1040NR for individual. Forward with that. You can either continue as a branch operations. I wouldn't advise that you do that because there's certain liability risks associated with that. So the majority of the time we highly recommend incorporating, and you would be subject to tax on that according to whatever the treaty rate is. And you could be subject to that even though you haven't received a distribution from the corporation. But when you get a future distribution, then that wouldn't be taxable because you'd be coming from the bucket of an Indian company with a US branch. We talked about some of that stuff. You're only taxed on the effectively connected income of the trade or business in the US, just on those activities. You're going to need a US identification number, which is the federal EIN. Just talked about the branch profits. There's no liability shield. You've got limited liability, so much more protected. Can't, unless the corporate veil is pierced. Transfer pricing is another hot topic. In India, you have annual requirements to look at your transfer pricing, and basically that is making sure that what you're charging between, and I would have to say there's a lot more organizational, you got to get incorporation documents. You have to have bylaws established. You may need a shareholder agreement, buy-sell type agreements when you're incorporated. So there's a lot.
US law and regulations that we have seen. I think it's not complete until unless we also see the Indian regulations. Okay, so what are the regulations that from an India perspective that we need to do when they go for a M&A or restructuring? That I'll try to highlight more rather than running through the slides. By a resident individual and also by an Indian party. Resident individual under LRS or ODI, Indian party either through subsidiary or through a branch. Okay, so we already seen that. Now we will go what is for the resident individual and also for the Indian party. Okay, so either it's a resident individual or an Indian party, they can, if you read the provisions, it says a contribution to the capital or subscription to the memorandum or association or by way of purchase of existing shares. It went into an LLC. Okay, so it means you can only make an investment to the INC. Okay, but when you approach AD Bank in the sense, because now everything here, whatever the documentation, the point of contact between you and where you make 100% of equity into that particular entity. Okay, so these definitions are very important to know. Once you have to route all your transactions only to the one AD Bank. Okay, suppose if you are making ODA now, that whatever the communication that you are doing only through that AD Bank. Okay, and this is something and point. Okay, and I also want to touch upon few points. So once you set up a JVR owned subsidiary, there are generally, like in India, there is no compulsory or mandatory in India. So it's very, very important is it should be an operating entity and you should have to do a capital contribution. It means you have to send money to your AD bank, okay, and the normal banking channels to contribute to the capital and expenses. There is some business activity. Individual and he's supposed to send capital to that company like 2 years, but he has not done that.
So the money has to go from the individual's account to their US entity they have found, or if it is a, let's say, LLP in India.
Okay. Yeah.
So it is the entire process is only one time. Let's say if you have made a
Yeah, I'll come there. Subject to investments, I'll come there.
Even for residents of US, right? Without country.
Oh, then there is no ODI, right? Because you are not sending any investment from here.
So one has to go through that.
Yeah. Right. And then now we have seen, but how much I have to send? How much I am and calculate 400% and send it. And for resident individuals, it is 2,50,000 per financial year. Okay, that is the LRS limit. Okay, and then if any investment above 1 billion, then you months. Okay, because there is a provision in the FEMA means any export receivable should be realized within 9 months. Okay, if it is within 9 months, then you can capitalize your exports and get the shares, but you have to report. And there is no valuation required for the initial investment. Suppose today you send money and after 1 month again you want to send money, then there is a valuation required. If there is a valuation required, then you have to go to your CA. But and one more thing, these regulations are undergoing change, and you got the UIN number, because unique identification number is what the number that you get immediately once you send the money. And then what is important is you have to submit share certificate. I'm talking why only INCs are eligible, why LLCs are not eligible, because in LLC you won't get share certificate, and this is one thing that has to be realized. Okay. General questions? Yeah, so I am being a consultant, I provided services. Branches. So before we go to the branches, okay, and again that US company want to set up company in the India because they want to have an offshore company to take care of the Indian operations. Okay, being a resident individual, forming like doing a cabinet. So what if it's Indian party? Okay, because it's not a resident individual.
You are saying that the Indian entity can have the US subsidiary. You suggested that the US subsidiary cannot have anything back.
Their companies to be the US because of the various reasons, valuation or they see a more secure legal system, all that. They come to us saying, no, I want my parent company to be the US. And you are asking not to make any step-downs, including India, then it's a hardship. Now the draft notifications are in place and consequences. This is something most of the people will do mistakes and immediately will get on to the branches. Okay, because already Amy has spoke about differences between the branch and the subsidiary, and even the differences. Okay, and we need to cover. Okay, so like for the initial expenses, what is the limit in which I can send the money? For the recurring expenses, because it's branch, right, it cannot self-sustain and I have to send money. Okay, but these slides I think will be shared to you, and this is for our information purpose. And you can open a bank account there for the branch, and every 2 years you need to renew that facility. And in which state I have to form the in the US, which state is more beneficial to me, or in which state I need to form this US entity, right? So I think now, yeah.
It's primarily guided by the state. So the immediate question every time that comes in is, which state is beneficial for me to form? And everybody does a search, first immediate search. I want to show up as a director. I don't want to show up as an officer. Generally in the US, owners need not be listed. Unlike here, there is no mandatory requirement for the state for us to submit planning, right? Delaware doesn't have tax, but again, nobody does real business in Delaware. Why is Delaware the prime choice? Mostly because of the legal system. And Amy, you can talk through.
Yeah, it's very popular because there's a lot of favorable court cases.
But for that too, we'll talk about why should you not go into Delaware if you don't have investment. We'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
So the friend, yeah,
Dave has something to say.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They formed companies in certain states, but once the money was flowing in, the first request was you first become a Delaware and then the next steps go in when investors come in. We'll talk about that too. Then friendly states, of course, I see a lot of requests coming from
California income tax rates are much higher.
Yeah, but based on our experience too, right, with all the clients, most of them are India-based, the experiences that I'm sharing. We had one company which is a managed services company, large. Then no corporate income tax, there are certain states, but no personal income tax in sir. But again, no corporate tax is not a driver. We'll talk about that why. Is it easy to start in, say, Wyoming and then re-incorporate once you get funded? It is doable. There is no income tax for individuals. There is no income tax for business. That's what it says. But there is something called as margin tax and franchise tax. And the difficulty in the rule is your P&L for corporate return, your P&L says $50,000 profit, let's say. I think we covered most physical presence and foreign qualification. That is what I wanted to cover. So when they say they want to go into Delaware, if you are an e-commerce based company, you will always be virtual. It's not a big deal. But would you ever do, let's say an e-commerce company went in and floated a company in Wyoming. How much sale will you do at your multi-state registrations and allocation of your income based on where you generated your revenue? So you will obviously, even though you are in a tax-free state registered, you might end up paying the state tax because you're in training a company that came in from India to the US. We didn't know, it was a learning. We floated a company, they operated. They did some training sessions in New York or some states where immediately they...
The soft registrations is actually just by filing a tax return where you have a tax filing requirement, the state will automatically register you. However, there are a lot of states that also require you, if you file a return and you didn't register, they'll reject it and not process.
They're not qualified. So immediately the law firm advised you are never qualified here to operate in Texas, but you had to register, you did not. So you don't have any legal privilege to go after or sue. So foreign... If you are a SaaS company, you may operate in any of the 50 states. Correct. So actually you have to have... No, SaaS you might not need to sections. There are rules to... if you're doing within the limit, you don't need to register.
The majority of the states have a $100,000 threshold, and it could be a certain number of transactions.
So it's a cost that you're collecting and you're paying back. So sometimes people come and say, but we have seen, especially in SaaS world, when you don't charge sales tax, we have seen clients complaining, saying, why? Oh, I don't know customs. Yeah. We might look into it. But if not, then we have to look at different things too.
But PFK Mueller is not having anything in Delaware.
No, we don't need to have anything in Delaware. We are a global.
Help us set up in
Yeah, it does.
you guys do it.
Yeah, we can provide references, you can subscribe and all of that. That's non-issue. Yeah, end to end, we can help whatever you need. So fine, so consequences of foreign qualification.
I'll take 30 seconds.
Yes,
Your first suggestion was to go for a C-Corp.
yes. Yeah,
So you can help us sitting here in India, you can help us set everything.
yeah, India, yeah, Srini and team are there from an India standpoint. They'll take care of India compliance. We can help with anything to do with the US. Yeah, oh yeah, for. So non-count to Illinois. And he's sitting in Illinois, but you are still charging your taxes. There is no tax and you're running payroll. Big bite. So that's been happening lately with COVID and remote work. That's a very
business in the state that you're moving to.
yes, and especially when there is investment and stuff like that. The scenarios we have seen is all the history has to be there, all your contracts, all your employees, nothing changes.
Your US entity, it's time to know about the taxation aspect in the US, both federal and state taxes. I think Amy will throw some light with regard to.
As you can see, there are a lot of different taxes. I don't know how many different taxes you have in India, but not all of the ones that we have in the US are listed here. These are some of the most common. This chart shows you, as of January 2022, the various different states in the tax rates in those states. Is there a slide up for this one?
It's not going?
No.
Shankar, it's not moving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Could a you? Mm-hmm. Yes, they could. Yes, yeah. It's just the main point about the S-Corp is you can't have a foreign shareholder in an S-Corp entity. There's a sales tax, various gross receipts tax that may apply, and excise taxes. And if you own property, you always pay annual property taxes. Thank you.
You have two more
subjects. So here's another one of those fancy maps that I like because you can see the visual depiction of just how complicated sales taxes can be. And then where was and then some of them are like much lower, 5.73%. I was trying to look for one that's a little bit lower. But the point is there's a lot of different states. You've got obligations in 25 different states to deal with. When you're close to selling your company, consider taking those states out of that mix. That you might get a more favorable tax outcome if you get out of, so you have to start filing there. There's economic presence, which is the really hot one now, which they're getting away from the more traditional physical presence standard. So as more establishment when doing business in foreign countries. Another interesting statistic, with the 50 states that we have, there's 3,006 different counties, but there's tens of thousands of two. It doesn't apply to services. So for tangible personal property sold in states, if you're only soliciting sales into a state with an actual product, you wouldn't be subject to income tax, but that doesn't apply to. Did you catch all of that? It's hard to hear.
Because of the market play and the value, that is different. You need some brain power, but it is worth to invest that upfront. And especially when you're going down the path of investment, that becomes a red flag during due diligence. There are two cases that happened with us, our own clients that came in. So invest complex, it's worth to put the effort. Even for us, it's not a straight answer. You come across the table and you ask Arizona, what is happening? No, we don't sit with the brain power. So we do the analysis. We need to do some little bit of research.
Compared to what I am planning to make here, in a range of.
It depends on what type of complexity you have.
Let's say you have a SaaS where you are using a SaaS and it's still a person AB business which you have.
Yeah,
like
probably like paying a salary to an.
The identification of the nexus, the registration and getting things up and going is the more complicated part.
Yes.
Once it's established and you know the plan, it's much more easier, and they've got the specialized firms to assist with the compliance.
The filing and all of that is pretty simple. Background, I was here, 97 is when I went to US. Okay, I qualified as a chartered accountant, always wanted to be in practice. But the entry point to the US then was not practice. I was into consulting management. You would have, with your brilliant minds, you would be a high-paying technologist specialist with anybody. But why did you jump into it? Same way I jumped into it. Not as fruitful or not as encouraging as a technology, because we are in a boring subject of accounting. But the reason I'm saying that is, right when we started the practice, after a couple of months, we met our first client. And the first client was also a startup at that time. And he has sailed through the journey from 17 employees, one office, almost virtual office, to 10 offices, or of course in multiple countries, 3,000 employees, $150 million of revenue, 10 years, $150 million of revenue, growing 40% every year. Proud to say we're still his, I should not say advisor, because he is a strong advisor by himself. He is a strong mentor by himself. He put in some rigor into our own processes. He's not an accountant. And I welcome Leela Chagwa.
Thank you, Funny, for the warm introduction. Good evening, everyone. I see a lot of successful startups in T-Hub over the years, and I think several of you are already in that camp. And those of you that have recently started, obviously this is a Pradesh in Vijayawada. Did my undergrad in mechanical engineering from PSG Tech, Coimbatore. And after that, I moved to the States in '92. So for almost now a 30-year journey in the US, but I've also relocated to India in 2013. So I think why Funny wanted me to address this group is because I've been in both sides of the continent, and out of Clemson, South Carolina. At one point, I had about 7 jobs on campus. It always wanted, the hunger was to do something better. Sabre, which at the time was a division of American Airlines. And so moved to Dallas, Texas, and started, my first salary was about 37,000 US when I did start computer interaction, how to build interfaces that are more user-friendly. So Sabre had a very strong practice in that, and that's where I started. And was with Sabre for about 4 years. 2 out of those 4 years I was in Europe, military bases. And this company was contracted to move all of those US personnel across those bases and back to the US. So complex project, Sabre. Did about a year, one of the founding team members of Travelocity. And Travelocity is you're very similar to Make My Trip, right? It was one of the, Travelocity and Expedia were the two very early on adapters of the online travel solutions. Pursue his dream, and that is essentially how Trilogy was created. So very inspiring story. Was working with them for about 8 years or so. Started with them in '99 and did extremely well with them. Prior to that, I made a couple of attempts, failed at those. Both times it's services, but both times it wasn't a primary responsibility for me or for any of my partners. And it never worked because none of us could give salary. There was no math behind it. That's what I wrote the check. And it was the only check I ever wrote for the business all these years. So that was the only money that we ever invested into the business.
Great.
So yeah, we ended up, of course, paying tons of tax both in US and India. We didn't do any funny math. But it's a good outcome. It's a great outcome. I diluted significant majority, but I also retained significant minority in the business. And I continue to run the business today as a group CEO. But try to establish our identity, right? So that was the problem definition when I started the business. So at the time when we studied the market, the company that stood out was ThoughtWorks. I don't know how many of you know ThoughtWorks, but we used to give away Porsche Boxsters as raffle gifts to hire people away from Microsoft and Amazon back in those days. Okay? So from that pedigree, we always had this tagline of only the best. For years, we predominantly focused in the US market. We started building some core competency. But 2010 is when I started the India operation. And again, we did the exact same thing. We went to business. And again, like another colleague of mine happened to be the VP of technology. And because of the goodwill I had with him, he gave us our first project. So from there, we went to Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, UBS. So we focused on verticals. And we wanted to go deeper into verticals. So banking, financial services, insurance, BFSI was one of our core verticals. Healthcare was one of our core verticals. And technology and telecommunication, TMT, technology, media, and telecommunication, that was another core vertical. So we decided to go deep. We decided to understand domains. And we hung on to them, and we've grown with them over the years. Right? And if we talk to somebody, they would convert that into a sale. So I think long story short, it was a very meaningful exercise to build a company from ground up, pipeline of another 2 or 3 acquisitions. So by the end of the year, we'd expect to be closer to 200 million in revenue. So, and more importantly, what I want to emphasize is we had 2 entities in India, we had 2 entities in the US, we had a came through my request, and Prem, who's also a very strong associate of Funny, he's kind of he feels like our own employee and as a stakeholder. And then I started a company with me as a stakeholder because we wanted a transfer pricing agreement for some part of the business. And then same thing in the US. At one point, we had employees in almost 30 states in the US. And therefore, we had to do a lot of tax returns and each of the state compliances, income taxes for each of the states. Very, very fair these years, including now a large part of our US business is all supported directly by Mueller. So I think in closing, been a rewarding journey, been a very profits, so growing at 30-40%. So I could have kept growing at the same pace for probably at least for another 3-5 years. I could have sold to a strategic like an Infosys or a Wipro or a E&Y or Global Logic. We knew we had the right capabilities and leadership. We wanted to scale much more aggressively, right? M&A, personally being a risk-averse person, I never carried any debt, either personally or professionally. Right? Weighing all the 3 options, doing it on our own, selling it to a strategic versus aligning with a private equity, high-quality private equity, I picked the private equity option. And fast forward 14 months now, from the differentiator, core USP that differentiates you from the rest of the pack, I think you will do well. And happy to, again, take any mentees if you guys have some specific business problems that you would like to sound off. Happy to chat with you guys offline. But I wish you all of you the very best. And thank you, Funny, for giving me the opportunity to address this group.
Okay. Hope this was helpful and you enjoyed what.
Thanks, Funny. Before we conclude, I need to congratulate my team members who is working for the last 3 to 4 days, spending the sleepless nights to make this presentation happen successfully. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So it's Vinisha and Ratnakar. With this, we'll conclude this event for today, and you can all join us for the high tickets.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivas. Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Shankar from T-Hub. For joining here physically and also people joining over Zoom, thank you so very much. I'd like to request Mr. Prithvi of my colleague to take next 20-30 minutes about Community Connect. That's what we call. Prithvi, over to you.
Hello everyone, thanks a lot for joining us today. Hope based on that they've done brainstorming in terms of the challenges that they are facing, and we've curated all of that and worked accordingly in terms of collating the solutions for those challenges. So we'd like to take you through the same, and also please feel free to raise any other queries